Hello, I'm Bill Brewinger, and today we're going to be brewing a Slovenian Blonde with the most unusual ingredient, maple sap. Never brewed with maple sap, but we're going to see what it does. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this brew session.
We're going to stop in Martinsville, Indiana, where we'll meet a husband and wife who've been maple farming for a few years. We'll find out about the syrup they produce and a little bit more about the sap in its production. From there, we'll go into Indianapolis. We'll see a store manager of Great Fermentations. We'll get his take on our project. While we're there, we might as well pick up some much needed grains. After we're finished in the grain room, we'll stop by and grab a few hops on our way out. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy this brew session.
Well, I'm Phil Preparo. My wife Sue over here. We've been doing this, like I said, since 2010, kind of as a hobby. We're a small operation. We only make about 18 gallons a year of syrup. We sell them locally in the local market. It's kind of a fun thing to do. The season is short. I mean, it's only a couple months at the most, typically. By the time you're tired of it, it's usually pretty much over.
What type of yield would you say you might get, in the variations from tree to tree versus age of a tree, anything to that effect?
It just varies. It varies on the weather, it varies on the tree. You'll get two trees that are side by side. Tree on the left will, on a good day, will give you a gallon. Tree on the right will give you a half gallon. And you'll go out the next day and all of a sudden the tree on the right is doing good and the tree on the left isn't doing anything anymore. I mean, it doesn't seem to be any rhyme or real reason to it. The big thing is you got to have freezing nights and you got to have warm days. So if you got nights around in the 20s, mid to upper 20s, and then you have another following day, 40 degrees or better, the sap flows pretty good.
Excellent. How many gallons of raw sap boil down to 1 gallon of syrup?
Currently this year we're running about 56.5 gallons of sap to 1 gallon of syrup.
Is that typical? Is that good? Is that bad?
It just varies, like what I've said, it just varies on the sugar content. I mean, if the trees had a good year and they produced a lot of sugar and stored them in the root system, then you're going to get a higher yield. If it was a bad year, and we had that drought, so I was kind of wondering about how good this season is going to be. So far it seems to be doing all right.
What kind of percentage sugar are you running in sap right now?
I haven't tested it. My guess is we're probably somewhere between a half and maybe 1.5.
Do you measure by bricks or specific gravity?
We use bricks. We have a hydrometer for raw sap, and we use a hydrometer to do the finished syrup.
Sue, about how long would a bunch of sap last if I keep it refrigerated?
In the refrigerator, you could probably extend the life maybe to 3 or 4 days from fresh sap. Now, what you're seeing in the tank right here is sap that we have collected on warmer days. The last couple of days it has been in the 50s during the day and has not dropped down below freezing. The trees were still producing, so we went ahead and collected, and we have to use this right away. You can see that it has started to cloud up some. Once it gets too cloudy, we'll have to dump it. Now, past years, we've had warm days like this that have gone on for several days. We've had to actually dump our storage tank, whatever was in the storage tank, because it got too cloudy and we could not use it anymore. What we do to extend the life of the sap for us is we have a system back here with a pump, a filter, and a UV filter to help extend the life. But because we cannot refrigerate our 200-gallon tank out behind the building here, this system only extends the life of our sap about 2 or 3 days. Kept refrigerated, I think you may get an extra day or 2.
Excellent.
Hello, my name's Bill. I'm the store manager at Great Fermentations.
So Bill, what kind of difference do you think using maple sap will do to a Slovenian Blonde, what do you think it might do differently versus just regular water?
Honestly, I have no clue. If you want my professional opinion, I've never heard of anyone doing this before, so I'm not entirely sure. There's a couple of things that come to mind. You're dealing with a maple sap, which has a small amount of sugar, and will probably contribute a small flavor character to the beer. Maybe even a little bit of that maple character once the beer is boiled. You've also got a few trace minerals too that will certainly add flavor, but truthfully, I don't know.
I was planning on doing bottle conditioning using maple syrup instead of dextrose. Do you think this will overpower, or do you think this might just help enhance what little bit we might get from the sap?
No, I think it would be a good enhancement. Again, you don't get a whole lot of that maple flavor from the sap with a typical maple syrup. When we get that big maple flavor, it comes from the extreme boiling that the sap undergoes to condense it down into syrup. You might get a little bit of that during the boil, but I don't think you get much. So adding the maple syrup will probably help with that character in the beer.
Do you think with the conversion, using all grain recipe is going to be better than using a bunch of extracts, basically?
Absolutely, absolutely. All grain, of course, gives you more control over the final product. Yeah, I'm just an all grain fan.
Good. Any other styles you think might work good in this?
Yeah,
if this turns out.
If this turns out, I would definitely go with something a little bit more robust next time, a stout or a porter, maybe even a brown ale. I'm a big fan of brown ales. I think that could be a great beer to be brewed with a little maple influence.
Cool.
Back to brewing. We're going to start heating up our sap. It's kind of cold right now, so we're going to have to warm it up a little bit before we can take a gravity reading. When we get it warmed up enough to take a gravity reading, we're going to just keep heating it up to get our mash going and our brew in the bag. You can see it's already pretty cold, so we're going to have a little bit of heat to throw on it.
We're going to be doing a brew in a bag technique, so we're going to heat up our water first. We're going to shoot for about 156 Fahrenheit. So we got a little ways to go. So I'm going to head inside. It's a balmy 16 degrees on this beautiful Indiana morning. And I'm going to get some coffee. We're about at our temperature that we're going to go ahead and throw our bag in for our brew in a bag technique. So then we'll mash in our grains. So this isn't going to be so much as a video for an instructional brew session. This is just going to be more of a documenting the differences between using regular traditional brew water and the maple sap. Started coming up with this idea as I'm seeing guys do maple porters, maple stouts. I figured, what can I do differently to set mine apart from everything else? Come to find out, everybody was still using regular water, but they were just putting maple syrup in. So I decided to take it one step further. Developed a relationship with a guy online from his maple tree farm, and kept in touch with him when it was time to collect some sap. We grabbed about 8 gallons for this project. Might be a little bit too much, but I wanted to have enough extra just in case something happened. Like I said, this is a Slovenian Blonde recipe, so this is going to be a relatively light beer. Not a big heavy gravity. We're going to be using Y yeast, Bohemian lager, for our fermentation. We are sitting a little too warm right now. We're going to turn it off completely. Keep stirring it in. Now with that set, we're going to cover it up. Thermometer says about 161. I know it needs to be calibrated, so that actually means we're about 157 right now. Degree high, but it's probably going to cool down here after a bit, and I'm going to turn some more heat on. So now, another weight session. After doing a quick pH test, I'm going to add about a teaspoon of calcium carbonate to the mash. It's a little on the high end. It's a little different than what I'm used to with normal water, so did a quick pH test, a little high, so we're going to try to drop down the pH just a little bit. Let's see how this goes. We've just about run the course of our mash time. We're mashing it for about an hour. And so I've got about a gallon of sap ready to rinse the grains, or we want to say sparge. You know, a lot of guys who use mash tuns are kind of anti-sparge word for a brew in the bag technique, but we got some sap that we're heating up that we're going to rinse the grains off here. We're going to let that cool for a little bit, and we'll figure out what our gravity is on that.
Our specific gravity for our maple sap was 1.006. After our gravity reading for our mash with just using 6.5 gallons of sap, we had a 1.04. After our boil and when we pitched our yeast, we had a gravity of 1.050. It's a bit higher than I originally expected, so we'll see how this turns out.
So we got our last little reserve of sap that we're going to use to rinse off the grains. We're going to pull the bag out, rinse off the grains, and we'll get ready to start our boil. And I don't want to squeeze my grains too much. I don't want to compact them. I want them nice and spaced out when I give them a good rinse, so that way I can get in between them and try to get all those fermentables out. We're just about at a boil, so we're going to add our wort salt now. We're going to add some sulfates, just under half a tablespoon. We're now boiling, so we're going to add our first hop addition. We're going to add a ½ ounce of Celia hops. It's a Czech hop, usually a great aroma and flavoring hop. It's got a low alpha acid, but it's only a 4% alpha acid, but for the recipe that I've used it for a couple times, and it's going to be okay for a relatively low gravity beer. So I'm not too worried about not getting what I want from the hop bitterness from it. It's going to be alright. We're ready for our second hops. We've got a 1/4 ounce also of Celia's. So we're ready for our last hop addition. 15 minutes left in the boil. We're adding 4/10 of an ounce of more Celia's. Again, these are all at 4% alpha acid. We're going to put the immersion chiller in. Give it a few minutes to sanitize in the boil. I know, I should probably not even use the thing today. Hey, alright. But given all the variables on this project, I want to get this thing cooled off fast and pitch the yeast as quickly as possible. Since I just added the immersion chiller, I have about a tablespoon of yeast nutrient and a Warflock tablet that I'm throwing in also for the last 15 minutes or so of this boil. Every brew day has at least one hiccup in the road, and today we realized we're not going to be able to run the hose due to well, it froze up in the garage again. So we're gonna have to cool this down via other means necessary. So you know, stay tuned for that. I think I'm just going to cover it up with the lid and let it sit out for a few hours in our balmy now 19-degree weather here. So we'll see how this goes. So here we are cooling off the wort now with our immersion chiller hose frozen. Just to the next of it, we have a red birch beer soda for the kids and for Mom. But obviously Dad and his cronies are gonna be enjoying this. Okay, so now that we have it cooled down to about 85 degrees, like 80 degrees now, we're going to make sure that we sanitize our nozzle. We're going to transfer into the carboy and pitch the yeast, and somewhere in there we're going to need to take a gravity reading. So okay, so now that we have the transfer complete, we're going to sanitize the outside of our yeast slurry, our starter. And we're also going to grab our sanitized funnel. And we're going to pitch our slurry of 2124 Bohemian lager yeast.
Good morning. It's 10 hours since we pitched the yeast. We have a good krausen on top. Good airlock activity. Everything's looking good. This is a 6.5 gallon carboy, and if you remember, I started off with 8 gallons of sap. So I'm a bit disappointed with how much boil off I've had. At this point, I'm wishing I almost had 9 or 10 gallons of sap for this project.
We've had 6 days in primary fermentation, so we're going to rack this today. We want to hurry up and get this off the yeast. Don't want any diacetyls or any funk kind of creeping in because it's been sitting on the yeast too long. I want to try to get as much of the natural flavor that we're going to get from the maple sap if we're going to get any. So we're going to rack this, take a gravity reading, and see where we stand. Just to kind of catch you up on speed, what's been going on in the past few days. After we got this cooled and we pitched the yeast, I cold crashed it to 50 degrees out in the beer fridge. So we primary fermented it at 50 degrees for 4 days. 2 days ago, I pulled it out, give it a diacetyl rest. Pretty much the airlock activity had stopped by that point. So we warmed it up to about room temperature, so it's about 66 degrees right now, and that's why we're racking it. So we had about a day and a half for the diacetyl rest.
A quick round of musical carboys. We're going to make room to lager the Slovenian Blonde recipe. We're taking out an Oktoberfest and giving it a little bit of a diacetyl rest.
Stay. We're going to lager this for about a month and a half, 2 months.
After lagering for almost 8 weeks, we're going to pull this out of the beer fridge. We're going to need to reactivate the yeast a little bit, get them warmed up and excited to bottle condition using the maple syrup. We're going to warm this up in the furnace room next to a sour and a kombucha tea. Kombucha tea. Well, we're going to do some funky mushroom tea. A quick priming calculation. Maple syrup is 65% sugar, so if I would normally use 1 cup of dextrose, I would need just over 1.5 cups of maple syrup in order to prime this properly.
We're transferring into the bottling bucket now of the beer. Before we transferred any of it, we took our maple syrup that we're going to use for priming. We took about 2 cups of the beer, and we're going to mix that with our maple syrup as we do our priming. We've done this so far without any of the water. We've done it all with maple sap. So at this point, we're not going to taint it with any city water in any way, even if it is filtered or not even RO water. We're just going to use the beer. This was a little tricky. The heat break on this really wanted to just bubble out and bubble over. So if you ever tried this project, I highly recommend bringing it up very slowly to a boil. Took a lot of pulling on and off the burner in order to keep it from boiling over. So when bottling, I always like to save a few clear bottles, either from Newcastle bottles or Minehouse Craft Brewery does a great cream soda, an orange cream soda that I love their clear bottles if you're ever in Monroe, Wisconsin. But I always like to save a few clear bottles. So that way when I give it to a few friends that maybe have never had a live action bottle conditioned beer before, you can actually show them a little better with a clear bottle. Show them that little bit of yeast sediment from the bottle conditioning and how when they pour the beer to be careful not to get the yeast in. I mean, it's not gonna hurt them by any means, but it might distract from the flavor of the beer. So I always like to save a few clear bottles. That way I can show them.
Capping fast forward.
So now that we have everything bottled, we're going to bottle condition it. We're going to let it sit in the garage for a couple of weeks before we do another lagering in the fridge. So it's time to put these puppies away. Okay, so we're back. We're doing a tasting panel of the Maple Sap Slovenian Blonde. I got with me Phil, the guy who provided me this app. I have Nathan from IndianaBeer.com, Wes from Great Fermentations, and Nina, the owner of Great Fermentations, and Jason from Jason from McClure's Winery and Orchard, and Steve, good buddy, brew friend. And we're just kind of giving our thoughts of the Maple Slovenian Blonde.
What's the last name on the account?
Second.
Anybody chime in?
C-A-E-N.
It's got a very good nose to it. It's got a color reminiscent of maple syrup.
I am.
Yeah, so I was expecting this beer to be very sweet based on the description, and it's really not. It's got a fairly thick mouthfeel, but it's very typical. It's fairly dry. A little bit smoky, maple, caramely, but very nice.
It goes down very smooth. It's got a good smoothness on the tongue. It's a good texture too. And mouthfeel, like you said.
The pH came out to 5.6, so I didn't really need to add as much. Just a nice little way to get my wort salts as I normally do. So it turned out pretty close to the 5.2 that I was shooting for.
I like it. I can't give any detailed critiques. That's way too much beer to drink. It's very good.
It's like my first sample, so I'm still
It's really interesting because it's got a hint of maple syrup, but not a lot. Because it's made from the sap rather than the syrup, and so it's got a hint of that, but it's still good.
It's got some creaminess to it too that I like.
That's not good when the maple syrup ferments out. You get maple flavor, but it's really kind of...
It's okay. We're here at the store. It's okay.
Yeah.
It's not like maple sweetness. It's just kind of like the essence of...
Yeah, a maple quality in the wort.
I get a nice little raisin flavor.
Okay.
I like
So-
it.
So much for breakfast stout. Now we got a breakfast lager. It doesn't taste like the pancakes that I thought it would.